In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of anyone.
We've all seen that person that knows it all. You know that guy that knows everything? Well, that's not what you're getting here. I'm a know-nothing kind of guy, just trying to broaden my horizons. Join me on my journey of Scotty Doesn't Know. Good afternoon, you know-it-alls. Another episode of Scotty Doesn't Know, and today I'm going to be talking about pottery, which I may or may not have some pottery in my blood. My mom's sister throwing stuff for years and years, and I've never participated with it, but I think my favorite story from there is she had a lovely casserole dish, and my uncle ashes are now in it. So that's my take on pottery. So today I'm joined by Colleen, the owner of Bobcaygeon Pottery. Hi, Colleen.
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. You haven't made any urns yet?
I haven't, although that's on my radar.
I was shocked. And she's like, Jim always liked to eat. And beautiful little glaze thing. Obviously he didn't fit, all of them didn't fit into the dish. And then the kind people sealed the dish so it would never open again. And there he sits on the mantle. So
that's funny. I've thought about it a fair bit, actually. I've never posted an urn or advertised it, but that's an option if someone wants to.
If you think about it, right? It's shape, it's style, it's functionality, it's all those things. So you work right out of here, out of Bobcaygeon.
Yes.
And we were just talking sort of right before we recorded. You've almost been doing it for a year.
That's right. Well, I've been doing pottery since I first learned the craft and then invested in the equipment for about 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah. But I really only started selling. There comes a point in time with any potter, I think you're either going to be a hoarder or you're going to sell. And
there's only so much you can give away.
I gave away tons and tons of things. And then I just decided, and also I needed to increase my skills. I needed to get better because.
Right. And that's the push forward.
That's
so right. 4 years, what drew you to it 4 years ago?
Well, I had gone through a really rough patch in my life. I lost my dad, and I had been his primary caregiver for quite some time. And when he passed, I was just looking for an outlet, a creative outlet, because I needed to do something just for myself.
Right.
And I've always been a little bit artistic, and I've always been drawn to pottery. I've collected pieces, and I've admired it, and
never taken like you know, had you ever got your hands dirty before you decided
I had an introduction to it in grade 5, way back in elementary school. I had a teacher who ran a school kiln, and I did get a little introduction there, but I decided to take lessons, 6 weeks of lessons from a local lady, lovely lady, Sheila in Dunsford, and I very soon realized that this was something that you were never going to improve your skills in unless you owned a wheel.
A whole lot.
Because I couldn't practice. Like, you can't get better without practicing.
Right. And every piece is unique in that way.
That's
right. And I think you've got a bit of humor in scrolling through your Instagram, and it's very much you're like, oh, this one didn't turn out, but it's still very nice, or one that's broken or cracked in the process, right? So if anybody is floating around and they're at somebody's house locally, and you flip it over, that's your maker's mark there, right?
That's right.
Right.
That was a gift from my son, a Christmas gift, and I had, said to him, can you order me a stamp, get me a maker's mark? And some potters just do a little
squiggle or a stamp
squiggle, but anyway, that's become my mark, and I wanted it to reflect our town. I'm proud of Bobcaygeon.
Right. You get that all the time, and you're like, oh, Bobcaygeon, and then it's you get a handful of things that they'll drop in as their recognizers of where we're at, right?
That's right. Becomes more of a souvenir piece if it says Bobcaygeon.
That as well, right? You can start putting it in different places. So I was very interested that sort of the process of this, that now, is this starting clay or is this rejuvenating clay? because
that's reclaiming.
That's reclaiming
so
there.
When I throw on the wheel, all of my scraps and all of my trimmings and all of my failures go into the. Can I say bucket?
Yeah. Of course, we have an explicit rating here, so you're good that way. I like that.
Bucket beside my
right. So as long as it goes into the bucket, it doesn't dry out.
I add a little water, and it can smell a little funky sometimes, so I throw in a bit of vinegar. But what I love about it is that all of that clay gets recycled into usable clay again.
Right.
So nothing is wasted, and I appreciate that because I'm very thrifty.
Right. Now, as a whole, when you got started, and you sort of started, and then from a point of going from hobby to business, and it's sort of like this is still a hobby for me and my recording partner Wes. It's that initial buy-in. Yes. And then in looking into, and it's like every like any hobby, there's stores you like to go to, or like the Potter's Nook, or where you get all your candy and your fun stuff. So from an initial startup, is it hard to get started? Like you need,
I did a lot of research.
Right.
Like I went on Etsy Canada and followed other potters. I started following other potters on Instagram, and I saw what they were making, what they were selling, how they priced their items.
Right.
And I'd never really run a business before like this one. I've run a different type of business, but the learning curve was steep, to be honest, as far as figuring out what my game plan was going to look like.
Right. So initially you need a wheel.
Yes, you need a wheel. First, I purchased a wheel and clay and supplies just so I could start to play.
And then a kiln.
And then I purchased the kiln, which was a fairly big investment.
Right.
I mentioned that my father passed. Well, he left each of my siblings a little pocket of money. And
very good. I have golf clubs very similar to that.
And Dad would have been so proud because he always wanted me to do something artistic.
That's always fun. I've always enjoyed buying something special for yourself when you get that rainy day money or whatever, or a gift, or as you say, inheritance, and then it stays with you.
That's right.
Forever. That's
so
such a nice.
I love that I was able to guilt-free use that little bit of money without taking it out of our family budget to get started.
And with any equipment, I assume with pottery as well, good, better, best. So there is sort of stuff you can buy at a semi-reasonable, and then it progressively gets.
Yeah. I did look actually at a lot of used equipment because that's in my nature to buy secondhand, but I just didn't have any luck finding something.
I imagine people hang on to it unless they're growing. You know, if you have what you like, you hang on to it.
So I went with the local manufacturer of kilns, out of Oakville.
Oh, yep, that's where my aunt's out of.
Oh,
so
nice.
Maybe.
Well, she probably goes to Pottery Supply House
more than likely.
But they make Euclid kilns, and that's what I bought, was a Euclid kiln with a Bartlett controller and an Orton vent, and I hired an electrician to put in the right
got it all wired properly,
with a safety switch, and it has to be vented perfectly and installed according to manufacturer's instructions for safety. And I was very, very worried about that.
Right.
Because the kiln is in my home.
Yes.
It's not in a shed or a garage. It's inside my home.
You were saying when you first came in, you spend a lot of time in the cellar or the basement, right?
The cellar dweller. They call me. But once it got installed, and once I had I fired it a couple of times, it becomes second nature. And I got to tell you, everything I've learned, there's a YouTube video out there for everything. So, So when I'm nervous or when I don't know how to do something, when it comes to programming the settings, there's
something new. Somebody's got a suggestion and an idea, and you named it Harry.
That's right.
I thought that was awesome, right?
Every potter, some potters have multiple kilns, so they need to differentiate.
Yeah.
So yes, I named him Harry Potter because he's magic. And he's a potter.
I was like, oh, that makes complete sense to me. And I'm like, I like that. So as well as creating wonderful objects and stuff, you also do classes.
That's right.
A little bit. Yeah. So how often do you do those, and what's the price point? And do you like groups or singles or?
Well, COVID has played a part.
Of course.
Yeah. So I've kept, because I only have one wheel, I do two students at a time.
Right.
And so usually it's I've done mothers and daughters, best friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, just sisters. So usually it works out nicely because once I explain the format, I do 2 hours per evening over a 6-week time frame.
Oh, very good.
And usually they make and make and make for the first 5 weeks. And then I fire. Everything has to go through 2 firings.
Okay.
So then it goes, their treasures go through a bisque fire, and that prepares it. It vitrifies the clay. It chemically changes and alters it so that it's permanently fused.
Right.
And it's not delicate anymore.
You're not poking at it. It won't take a fingerprint. It won't.
It's really interesting. Like if you were to take a piece of bisqueware and look at it under a microscope, you would see it sort of has a surface like a sponge. It's full of holes. And that perfectly prepares the clay for receiving the glaze.
Right.
And then the glaze is basically teeny tiny little glass particles that are suspended in water.
Right.
And they provide as well as other minerals and different various.
Because that's what that. Yeah. Oh, please. That's okay. Yeah.
But anyway, it basically you cover the clay or the vitrified clay in the glass particles, and when it reaches a certain high temperature in the next firing, it turns into ceramic.
And that's right. And that's what seals it, and that's what makes it food safe, and all those things. Okay. Yeah. So we'll just go and there's a picture of Harry there.
Yeah.
And then this kind of, I thought this was cool. The super duper extruder.
That's right. So that was a game changer for me. So the alternative to that is hand pulling your own handles.
Right.
And when I do mugs, I do some pretty large orders for mugs, and hand pulling handles takes a lot of time.
Right.
And it's not fun. It's
not
my favorite.
No, right? It's You're just rolling out snakes, right?
So I splurged and I treated myself to that extruder. And the beauty of it is that it has many different cast iron dies that you can change.
So very much like Play-Doh.
Exactly.
And then it just pushes through. You get the size, the diameter.
Absolutely.
Oh, very good.
Picture a Play-Doh tool that squeezes out clay in different forms,
right?
And that's exactly what it is.
Very cool. And just sped you along, made you more efficient.
It has, although because I change clay bodies often, I have to thoroughly clean all the mechanisms and all the pieces.
Right.
And so I'm not entirely sure it's saving me any time, but it certainly produces great results.
Right. And then I assume, like for an order, all the handles will be the same. Then there's no there's no uniqueness to that one that you squeezed a little bit more or a little less.
Do. I mean, if it's just a small order, or like a beer stein for somebody, or someone wants a specialized mug, I do still pull handles. Right. Yeah. And there's lots of ways to customize them and personalize them and alter them so that they become unique. Yeah.
So I believe was your first post, little bowl.
Yep.
Nice and simple. I was thinking right now, I don't think any glaze on it, right? Or is the glaze white?
That looks like it's a matte white glaze.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I'm a little out of sequence there, but there's something fun with a lot of glaze on it.
That's right. Yeah.
So yeah. And as I say, right, as you say, you haven't been doing it too long, so it was easy to sort of backtrack in your history and see that growth. And as I say, certainly the pieces have gotten to be what, as a known nothing kind of no guy, have gotten more extravagant and different processes for sure.
Yeah,
so
I'm definitely learning as I go. There's a lot of trial and error in pottery. You don't know your glazes and how they're going to behave until you test fire.
Right.
So I do a lot of little tiny pieces, after the end of a throwing session, I have a little bit of clay left. I always make test pieces to test glazes on.
Right. And then you can see how it actually fires.
Yeah, like some glazes are runny at the base and they don't give you a nice crisp line. Others they're called glazes with flux in them.
Right.
And they help when you're layering glazes to create that movement and the dripping.
You're after it. Okay, very good.
So sometimes you want that. Other times you want a glaze that behaves very predictably so that you get that nice
same thing. Right. Yeah. So again, I actually my first experience with your product was down at Old Dog Brewery. And Scott there has the mug club, and you threw, what do you do, 50?
Oh, I think, believe it or not.
And he sold more, because this is a great story. I thought it was a great story that so he reaches out to you and so, can you do this?
Well, at first I had never done an order like that before, but I always try to maintain a growth mindset. I think, well, I haven't done it yet. And that word yet is very powerful.
Yeah.
And I just started pulling up videos on YouTube and thought, well, I don't know how to do this yet, but I'm going to learn. And so I did. And I inquired with other potters, and I'm a member of different Facebook groups. So I saw information.
Right.
And then I just gave it a whirl. And unfortunately for Scott, the learning curve was so steep, because this was the first time I'd ever had an order where size mattered.
Like volume.
So
right, capacity. He needed it to fit up a pint.
That's right. Yeah. Capacity. He needed it to hold 16 ounces with room for a head on the beer. And when I pull a cylinder, I have to know exactly how much that's and that's hard to calculate, because every clay has a different shrink rate. Sometimes it's 12% or 15%, and you have to be able to picture that. So I came out with a lot of pieces for Scott that were not up to standard.
Right.
But bless his heart, he was so gracious. He says, I think I can still sell those.
And I think he sold a ton of them.
Yeah. So we call those souvenir mugs.
Right.
But I kept working at it, and I kept working at it. And I finally came up with, you start with carefully weighed balls of clay so that you know how many grams you're working with. And then I finally figured out exactly how much clay I had to start with in order to be able to pull a cylinder to the height that I needed it to hold 60 ounces.
Yeah.
And I finally got it. So,
well, from practical experience, I would tell you, I think they actually make the beer taste a little better.
Oh, good.
We quite enjoy the beer there, and we quite enjoy drinking it out of your mug. So that's exciting. That's awesome. Now, as well, so the little dog, the spigot. So you're just doing that and stamping it, and then it gets attached sort of after.
That's right. Yeah. I just asked Scott if he had a stamp, and he said no, but I'll go get one made. And so he did. And there were a few tricks I use when I press it into clay. Not all stamps will release the clay nicely, so I either use cooking spray or cornstarch or something to get it to release. And then it's kind of a long process that. When you're making something with clay, there are small windows of time when you get to work with it at a certain stage. So that logo has to be applied when the two pieces are at equal moisture content. So
it's not like you can make a bunch of little cookies and then come back to them.
You have to do everything in stages. And so anyway, that logo gets applied using a score and slip technique.
Yep.
And then when it comes out of the bisque fire, I put underglaze, brush it on, and then I sponge it off so that the underglaze is trapped within the lines of the logo. And then I cover the entire logo in wax resist so that when I dip the entire piece in glaze, that glaze is not going to get on the
parts. It doesn't stick there. Yeah.
So then you can just wipe it with a sponge and clean it off. And
I was gonna say, this is already so interesting, more so than I just assumed it was like Ghost, and you just threw it on there, and Patrick and Demi, and they just made it happen.
I knew you were going to mention that.
Oh, of course.
Nobody talks about pottery
without that. I mean, I'm sure that, and this is sort of your collection of glazes and liquids and all that good stuff.
That's the neatest area. But basically those are just some newer stroke and coat glazes that I recently acquired. Which gives me more options in colors. However, they're time consuming and they're very expensive, and I'm used to dipping glazes. Usually I lean towards dipping formulations because they're fast and quick and easy. They're very expensive though. Glazes are. And
is it just, it's what the market will bear? So the people that produce it know that there's not a whole lot of other people doing it, and they're like, this is going to be the price. And that's just where we sit. And if you don't want to use our product, you're gonna not use it, right?
I did start off ordering a few things from Amazon, but the shipping was just killing me. So I make the twice-a-year trek to Oakville.
Right.
There's another spot in Richmond Hill called Tucker's that I can also get glaze supplies there. But recently I purchased some dry glazes so that you take them home, put them in a bucket, and mix the white water ratio, and you can save yourself a few dollars doing it that way. And so far, so good. I've had good luck with those glazes. So
that's good.
I may do that again in the future.
So this is that's the one with the glaze that I've already shown. But again, so that's sort of a dip, and then you just let it kind of migrate down.
Well, I call that a raw bottom. So I purposely don't glaze right to the bottom. Like when I layer on the glazes, I load it up sort of top heavy.
Yep.
So that when there's dripping that occurs, hopefully there's room for it there.
Right.
But it also, having a raw bottom allows the clay body to show through, and that's a speckled clay body, which is really popular.
Right. And I find too, it's so interesting. Has the internet allowed, in Etsy and all these resell, it's allowed people like yourself to actually have a broader market, I assume, or if you so choose, right?
I think the biggest factor is just that you can learn anything you want.
It's
from
all
YouTube
out there,
videos. And potters are very, very generous with their knowledge, and
it's a good group of
it's a wonderfully supportive community. They share tips and tricks, and they will help troubleshoot.
No one's hoarding their special combination.
They share glaze recipes, and when I have problems, I post it on a Facebook group that I'm a part of. It's called Pottery Heads, and like 50 people will respond that very day, and I've problem solved my way through a lot of different situations.
Very good. I think that's right. If that community is there,
and I think it's so cool that years ago, when you wanted to learn a craft, you would have to physically go and live with a master potter somewhere across the other side of the world,
right?
And that was really the only way to learn, or to take in-person workshops and classes and seminars. And now I can learn it all from my iPad.
Right. It's all there if you want it, right? Whether it's a recipe, or whether it's pottery, or whether it's knitting, it's like,
that's right.
There's something out there for everybody.
And I'm so grateful to all the people that share that knowledge so freely,
Right. And I think some of them just enjoy it. There's no gain to it.
Yeah.
I think they're just sharing to share for the love of what they're doing, right?
And that's kind of why I started offering lessons. I'm not skilled enough to be offering advanced level lessons or anything like that.
You're getting somebody.
I'm the first to admit I have tons and tons to learn.
But you've enjoyed it so much. So it must be sort of that push forward, or that sharing of everything that you've gained.
That's right.
To pass it down, right? Or get somebody else to get the bug, right?
That's right. It's because once you're hooked, and there's so much I haven't even tried yet.
Right. And as I say, like, just kind of going through some of this is my favorite piece. And it's simple.
It's so simple.
It's a berry bowl.
That's right. And I've sold so many of those because they're so versatile.
Right. And I really liked it, and I saw it, and it made me giggle. And ideally, right, it just allows the air to get in, so well,
it's for rinsing berries, or cherries, or whatever, some vegetables from the garden, whatever. But people love those.
It's nicer than my plastic colander that I've got, right?
Yeah.
And I think
I sell a lot of butter dishes, and
so this is sort of that same idea, where the clay is not quite and then you're punching the holes out, obviously, when it's still workable.
So that's at the leather hard stage. Clay has various stages that it goes through as it's going through the drying process. That's leather hard, and you can handle it without warping the shape, but you can also do some carving, you can do surface decoration, or punching holes.
Right. And those were ones I thought were, as I say, I think it's my favorite. If I was more of a noodle guy, I also like the
ramen bowls.
Yeah. And just from the fact that, and with the chopsticks and I've got it here because I enjoyed it too, like visually.
Yeah.
But I just be slopping it back with a fork. But that's just how sophisticated I am. And then, so this is a failure.
That's a fail, yeah. But I
beautiful piece.
I have a whole shelf of failures,
right?
But I find them helpful because I can show students what not to do.
Right. So beautiful piece, and then just did not like its time in the kiln.
That's right. The number one rule when you're making things with pottery is don't love it till it's done, because there are so many stages and things can go wrong at any one of those stages. So
you could, right. You could be in the first, now here on.
It could come off the wheel perfect, but then it can warp as it dries. It can develop cracks when it's drying, and then things happen in the kiln. You can get glazes that run way too much and fuse your piece to the kiln shelf. You can get cracking and more warping and explosions.
Right. Yeah. So on average, the size of the piece bases its time on that it's getting the heat, or like how long would an average piece be under heat in the kiln?
That's a great question. It really doesn't have much to do with the size of the piece or the amount of clay used to make it. It has to go through a bisque fire, which is the vitrification process. And I can usually get a lot in the kiln because those pieces can be stacked and nested and really crammed in there.
Right.
Because they can touch.
Okay.
But when it comes to the glaze fire, of course, you can't have anything touching. So your pieces, or they'd fuse together. So you can't get as much in the kiln. So for every bisque fire, bisque load, I should say, it usually is followed by 2 glaze fires in order to fit everything in.
And so would a bisque be the same time relatively, because it's the same clay for the most part now, or is there also different choices?
There's different. Well, the programs run at different temperatures,
right? And
they're programmed so that they're a slow bisque.
Right.
I usually choose a slow. Doing things slowly is usually the way to.
A little more patience, right? The things tend to,
So a bisque fire takes about 8 hours.
Okay.
And a glaze fire about the same, although it's a 24-hour cycle.
Right.
So if I put something in, start the kiln, there's usually a 3 or 4 hour ramp warm up, which I set and choose depending on whether or not I think there could be moisture in my pieces.
Okay.
There can't be any moisture in there.
So there's lots to think about too. Oh my.
And then, so by the time that it goes all the way up to temperature and then comes back down to room temperature, and where you can actually touch the pieces and open the lid, that's the hardest part.
Right.
It's not peaking. Because thermal shock is real.
Right. I think we've all seen a cake drop.
If you open that lid and cool something too quickly, it can just split, which I think is what happened to that brown one.
Right. Oh dear.
It was probably on the top shelf and I peeked.
So, you got a favorite thing to make?
I think I just like it when I'm done my order list for the day,
right?
And then I get to play
some you time.
Yeah.
Right.
And
but there's nothing you go, oh, I'm just gonna to do this, and you go to the same. You got something you go back to often?
I think I'm always looking forward to throwing large.
Right.
So I'm in small increments. I've been adding pounds.
Right.
And the more clay you're working with, the harder it is to center it on the wheel, the more muscles it takes. And so that's something you work at slowly.
Well, even way up, I think too, like your technique has gotten better, because on the one, I think you have quite a friction burn on your hand, right? Because
that was last Christmas. But that was just simply poor technique. That was,
right.
Not really an occupational hazard.
And you get your hands up off the wheel, and all of a sudden.
So the first part of making something is finding your center, and it's a very grounding experience. You have to get your piece centered, or your entire.
That's where you see that, that wobble.
If it's wobbling, and this is the hardest to teach new students, is how to center, but that's the foundational first step. So once you get your piece centered, you can start to open and pull your walls, and that's tricky. It's super tricky. It takes a lot of learning and failures.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, you threw this. And it's sort of I think you were originally thinking charcuterie board, and I think it ended up being an incent.
Yeah.
But it's not round.
That's true. That was made it's called a slab built piece.
So
it's not done on the wheel.
Right. To me, it's like, so you just kind of roll it out and
so that
taper
was another
it.
big piece of equipment in my studio that I saved for was my slab roller. And basically it's a big old expensive rolling pin, but it sure is a great time saver.
Right.
And it rolls out beautiful, consistently even pieces of clay that you can then shape into whatever you want.
Because that was through my head, and I'm like, to me, like, right, I think about pottery, and I think about and it's got to be round, and because the way it spins, and
pottery is not just about wheel throwing. It's hand building, sculpture, slab building. You can do pinch pots. There's just 101 different things you can do with clay. And it's not even just about making the structure. Like, you could go down a whole other rabbit hole with surface decoration and glaze techniques. And there's no end to the creativity.
Right. If you can kind of think of it and get it to go. And that's now, originally I thought that was probably a garlic one, but I think it's actually like a butter dish.
Exactly.
But
so I had some challenges with butter dishes because you have to fire those. Obviously, they're not like a pot where you fire them on their base. You have to fire it on its rim because you want the glaze on the top.
Yeah.
So I was having a really difficult time with all of my lids warping during the fire. So I went on Pottery Heads and asked for some advice, and they say, you need sand, throw some silica sand at it. And so when you sprinkle silica sand on the kiln shelf, it allows the clay to shrink, and the sand works like teeny tiny little ball bearings, and it allows it to pull and shrink.
And you would never have figured that out.
No, you can research any problem solve, and it's so great. So that worked out well, and I haven't had any warped rims since.
Well, there you go.
Just throw a little sand at it.
So this piece I thought was kind of cool too. And I think the gist of this is you're imprinting like a doily, or you kind of listed a few different things, and then the clay picks up that as you peel it off.
Yeah. So that's kind of a cool thing to do, because it really helps. Like, a lot of people, elderly relatives that might have crocheted or made doilies, but they're not really in style anymore.
No.
People don't really want to display them in their homes, but that imprinting them in clay is a wonderful way to capture that keepsake and display it in a different way.
Yes, exactly, right? I thought that, and I was like, that's really neat, because as you say, my parents have gotten to the point where we have packed them up twice, and now they're condo livers. And I mean, there was still stuff in their house that as grown children, they were still storing for us. And they're like, we can't store
I've done a lot of keepsake pieces for people. I had a bride bring me a piece of lace from her wedding dress, and we printed it into a little ring dish. With her wedding date and everything in it. And there's so many ideas.
And as I say, I just wasn't my thought process of that. And then I thought, that's really cool, because now you're getting a piece that you're going to probably use functionally way more than you're ever going to pull out, your wedding dress, or a piece of lace, or as you say, like a doily from 65. But and you can use it, and you can look at it and you'll be like, that means so much more than it sitting in the box in the closet, right?
Yeah.
And again, another little glaze piece. This is also, I really like this, just a regular old soap container.
Yeah, I've sold a lot of those. They're very popular. And I go on Amazon and I source the cork wine stop. The cork stopper was a bit of a game changer for me, because it's tapered. And it allows for a little more play, so that the diameter of the hole of the piece doesn't have to be perfectly exact.
Right. So some the cork will sit high, some it'll sit low.
Exactly. That's exactly it. But that really slowed me down at first, trying to calculate the shrink rate of the clay so that the diameter was the perfect diameter to fit another type of dispenser top that I had. And I failed miserably at it. So I finally came across these cork ones, and they were helpful.
Excellent. And that, as you say, texture. So that's would you have added those kind of that texture you would have thrown it and then kind of added it.
Absolutely.
Like leaves almost.
It's called when you add water to the clay, you water it down and you create slip. And slip can be used for all different kinds of surface decoration. So you make the slip out of the same clay body that you're working with.
Yep.
And then I basically just brushed that on with a paintbrush and then dipped it in clear. And then I did a little bit of surface decoration with some honeycomb pattern there. And
there you go. Little honey dish.
So I make things in small batches.
Right.
Like I think I probably made about a dozen of those at a time. And within a couple months, they were all gone.
Right. Again, you said predominantly Instagram and Facebook.
That's right.
So I would assume, because we're on Bobcaygeon, more on Facebook than Instagram?
I'd say it's equal.
Okay, we often have that discussion. The social media of older people is Facebook.
I don't know.
Versus Instagram, but maybe.
Well, I'm in that older category, and I was not very familiar with Facebook and how it works.
Right.
I really had no use for it before this.
Right. Yeah. And then when all of a sudden when you need to reach out and
but people reach out to me, they direct message me, and they say usually they think that I have a store, and I don't. I have a small home studio with a one shelf of stock that I'm trying to build for a Christmas sale that's coming up. But most of my work is in custom orders, and so I sell it as fast as I make it.
And now, so somebody came with a custom order, turnaround time.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, complexity, the piece, size, but
it's hard to predict, and I've learned not to make promises. I say I'll be in touch when it's finished.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
But there's a lot of steps to the process, and there's a lot of variables that I can't control. Like all this summer, we had a lot of rain, and that rain caused a lot of moisture and dampness in the air. And even though I was running 2 dehumidifiers in my basement, I couldn't get stuff to dry.
Still had issues.
I still had issues, and I had my first bowl blow up because it still had moisture in it.
Right.
So moisture trapped in the clay as it rises in temperature creates steam, and that steam has nowhere to go. So it just blows at a certain point, and it can take out other pieces beside it, and it can be a real disaster. However, my first disaster was just a little one, and it taught me a lot. So
there you go. That one. And again, another cute little bowl. I like that. And again, a couple different glaze styles on that piece.
That one has an interesting story. It's a friend of mine who is a macrame artist is going to take that bowl and do her magic on the rim. So that's why there are holes in it. I created that piece for her so that she could, she's going to wrap it in seagrass twine or something like that, and just do a little bit of decoration around the rim. So that's called mixed media art.
Very good. Yeah, as I say, right? It's those are the pieces that seem to be interesting to my eye.
Yeah.
And there's our ramen bowl.
Yeah.
Which I think, again, speckled clay, now that I know things.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting about that piece is that the speckles are not from the glaze. They're from the clay body. So certain glazes will allow those speckles from the clay body to show through, but others will not.
Right.
So I've just learned that particular glaze allows the speckles to show through, and it's one of my most popular ones.
I think it's a fun piece, right? Yeah. And I mean, all these kids in college and school, right? Nice to have a nice bowl to eat your ramen out of, right?
That's right. I think my last batch I made about a dozen of those, and I'm down to one. And they are popular with students. And
you've done different styles, like I think too, like and kind of floating through. I think you've done a couple different styles of bowls like that. I don't think I included it, but the yarn bowl, the yarn ball.
Yes.
So it's got the little kind of S hook in it, and you put your ball of yarn in, and then it kind of comes out nicely in a few different styles like that.
I don't want to deceive you. I don't want you to think that these are all my original
ideas.
No. If potters belong before me have been doing
I know, but I mean, right, that to me, it doesn't matter. You're now my Potter connection. So it's like, oh, I'll just ask Colleen. It's like,
I do get a lot of ideas from other potters.
I think that's how, now, as you say, that's the gist. And you're like, oh, I want to try that. It's no different than a carpenter or a chef. And you see all these things.
Well, customers will contact me and
they've seen stuff.
Well, they send me pictures of things and say, can you do this?
Right.
And I always say, well, not yet, but I'm going to give
back
it a
to
whirl.
That try. Yeah. I don't mind trying.
So I give it a whirl, and I'd have to say truthfully that I'm more brave and optimistic as a potter than I am skilled. I just really believe that I can do it. If I watch enough YouTube videos and give it a whirl, I'll eventually learn how to do it. So.
And do you ever get to that? Like, do you start one and do you get to that point sooner or later that you're like, oh no, I'm not ready for this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like I've pulled like cylinders as high as I think I've gone to about 15 inches.
Right.
Where you're standing up and putting your arm down inside. But then what do you do? How do you turn it? How do you trim it? How do you get it to fit in the kiln? Like,
so it can get away from you.
Of course it can. Yeah. And I'm guilty of being really ambitious, and I don't worry about the cost of clay because it's all recyclable.
Yep.
And if it flops, and you learn more from your flops than from your successes.
Right. I think that's the exciting part that I would have just assumed, if you kept working it would somehow lose its integrity but as long as
you're right, it does. It absolutely loses its elasticity. And if you're a thrower that throws with a lot of water, then it saps the strength out of your piece. If you pull too many times, so
that's when you'll just give up and start again from scratch. Absolutely. And into the buckets it goes.
That's right.
Again.
And I do that all the time. Start over.
I assume this was a bowl.
That's a great big bowl I made.
And I like the texture.
Yeah.
It was another one that kind of, I don't know if it reminded me more of like char on a wood or kind of like scales, but and that was you.
So again, not my original idea. I watched the technique on a YouTube video and I gave it a whirl. And it's called a nautilus bowl because it resembles the inside of a seashell.
Right.
So it has a nautical feel to it.
Isn't that funny? And I'm like, no.
It's basically you take that liquid slip, you put it in a squeeze bottle, and you put it on the wheel and squirt it as the bowl is turning so that you get a nice spiral all the way up the edges. And then I just grabbed a rubber rib, like a smoothing tool, and jumped it up and down as the bowl was turning to give it that cool pattern. But the neat thing about the pattern is that it's what causes the glaze to move nicely in the kiln. It gives it movement and
something to flow over.
Exactly. And that texture is just creates really neat results.
For sure. As I say, right, it's the pieces and the ones with shape and the ones with texture and weight are the ones that seem to catch the eye, right? Or that elicit an emotion, right? You're like, I couldn't tell you why I like it. I just like, I just like it. It's
sometimes I like pieces so much that it's hard to part with them, but I can't keep everything.
Right.
And
I guess it gives you an excuse to try that again.
Absolutely. And you get better the more you try things. And that's a rhubarb leaf bowl. That's just made from a rhubarb leaf from the garden.
You just pressed it in?
Press it into clay. Usually I have to use a release agent of some kind, again, either cooking spray or cornstarch or something. Those are notoriously difficult to get them to turn out because where the spine of the leaf is, it creates a weak spot in the clay. So it wants to break at that point.
At that spot.
Yeah. But a few turned out this batch this year.
We had terrible rhubarb this year. I don't know why.
Some years are not good.
Yeah, and some years we've cut it 3-4 times, and then this year I think we cut it once.
Yeah.
But no, that is exciting. So lots of stories, lots of stuff that you like. You're not afraid to try. you got a funny story from when you got started, or something that you're like, I can't believe I did that, or
saying yes before I know how to do things is a little bit nerve-wracking. I had the first lady that asked me for a set of 4 canisters, all with matching lids and, graduated sizing. Yep. I had no idea where to begin. But I said yes, so I kept pressing on, right. and now I've made multiple sets of canisters, and I record a lot. I write down a lot of details. I keep copious notes.
Right, and that that ability to go back and be like, this turned out, and this is how I did it.
Well, I write down how many grams of clay I started with in order to achieve a certain result. So then, like with Scott's mugs, I always know exactly how many grams to start with to be able to pull the walls to the certain height that I need, and also my glaze. I have a glaze notebook where I write down all the combinations and how many seconds I dipped it for. Like, everything's important.
It's not, as I say too, right? As much of it, if it's one of a kind, it's like, but if it's something you want to duplicate, notes are important. Oh, that's good.
For sure. I keep a lot of notes, but as far as something funny goes, I'd have to say I still chuckle at myself when I think about how unrealistic my expectations were when I first started. When I first started taking lessons, I literally thought I was going to make myself a dinnerware set.
Right. Yeah.
I still have never done that.
Oh dear.
I just thought it was going to be much easier. I thought, I'm a little bit artistic. I'll be fine. I've got this. Well, it was really hard. It was really, really hard. And I had a lot of failures for a long time, for many years before I felt that I had achieved something that didn't look like a preschooler made it.
Right. Well, I laugh, right? I think Food Source in Lindsay does that, the bowl donation.
Oh, yes.
And I mean, when you go in and look at the bowls, you're like, I don't know who's making these, but some of them are wonderfully and some of them, as you say, are like, oh my, they tried.
Yeah, exactly. And it takes a lot of confidence to put yourself out there. Like, as an artist,
exactly.
It's a piece of you're putting out in the world for people to judge.
Yeah. Well, this is it, right? And you get that first piece done, and you're like, I don't know if I want to share it, because
But I'd have to say that this community has been so wonderfully supportive.
Excellent.
And the feedback has been phenomenal, and it just keeps me going.
As I say, right, is, so glad that Scott asked you to do that, because I would never, as I say, right, when you're kind of tucked away and you're just kind of working out of your house and kind of and voice to ear on
and it's generated so much more interest in orders, and I'm making beer steins.
Crazy, right, lots of people wanting beer. And as I say, and that really talks about we talked about where you're at, and still the volume of things that you need to learn. Is there not they say if you do something for X amount of hours, you can become proficient.
Yes, I've heard that too. 10,000 hours before you're a master.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't consider myself a master and I am very much in the beginning stages.
Yeah. I was going to say, do you even consign yourself to that theory that I think it's a lifetime of learning?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there are so many different avenues I could go down. There's different ways to fire clay. There's raku firing, there's pit firing, and salt blasting, and soda firing, and there's just so many things that I don't even have knowledge about yet.
Right.
But I'm still learning, and I'm still keeping, for now, I'm successful enough to be paying for my supplies, which is awesome.
Right.
It means I get to play in clay for free.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's so cool, right? You're turning enough of a profit to, as you say, you get your supplies and your clay, and obviously that means enough people are interested in what you're you're doing, right? So that's always exciting and always feels good. Well, that's all I have. Anything else you wanted to talk about?
I don't know. I could talk about my dreams.
Yeah.
I've always worked with children and adults with learning disabilities. And so that's something I would love to pursue a little bit, is having the opportunity or creating the opportunity for adults and children with learning disabilities to really play in clay and explore.
Therapeutic and a real tactile feel.
Absolutely. So I'm kind of talking a little bit with a lady who runs a program, something like that in Lindsay. So we'll see if we can work out something.
That's exciting.
Some experiences for them.
Right.
But I really am enjoying teaching the beginner lessons.
Right.
Just because it gives people such an appreciation for the finished product that they didn't realize
that they had that in there.
Yeah, they didn't know that there were so many steps, and that's why I can't offer Walmart prices.
Actually, that's I love talking about pricing, and in this day and age of Amazon, and
I'd have to say
you sell a premium product that takes premium time and premium equipment. Have you had people struggle with that? And your time is valuable.
Well, I would say that's been the most difficult part of the process for me, is placing a dollar value on my own work and valuing the time and this, that went into it.
Yeah, as I say, from practical experience, you can't put an hourly price on your time.
Yes.
It has to be based on the project.
And I've had a lot of businesses ask me for a wholesale price. If they order in bulk, they would love to get a discount.
Yep.
But I just have to explain to them that there are no shortcuts.
I'm not creating it in a wholesale manner.
There's no shortcuts for me. And it doesn't matter whether I'm making 10 or 100, the time and the cost of the materials remains the same. So this is my price. If you want to place an order, go ahead.
Wonderful.
If not, that's okay.
That's okay too. And as I say too, is they've got wiggle room in their margin.
Yeah.
So I always find it funny that they try to soak it out at the base layer, right? And it's like.
But the truth is, you can go buy a mug at Walmart lots cheaper than what I can offer it.
Yeah.
But it won't be a one of a kind,
and it hasn't been touched by no, for sure, right?
There's a lot of different potters out there who use a mold to create, which is another form of art. I mean, if they created that mold themselves, then that's a form of art in itself, but that certainly allows them to replicate.
You're not going to get, everybody can have that mug.
That's right.
And have you had that conclusion yet, that like one of a kind piece and you're never going to do it again? Has anyone I want this? I don't even know. I know from like a tattoo perspective, right? If you get flash, everybody can have the same flash, the art that's on the wall, right? But if you get a custom piece, the artist is like, well, I don't copy. Or if I came in and it was like, I want that this other, and they know somebody else's flash, they're not big fans of.
I do struggle a little bit with customers who ask me to replicate another artist's work that they've pulled off Pinterest or Etsy or something like that. I always say to them, I can put my own spin on it, but I don't want to knock off another artist's work. So I want it to be somewhat original to me. So, but that's the beauty of working with the customers, is that I get to give them all the choices. I mean, you can choose your handle, your mug shape, you can choose the clay body, you can choose the glazes,
everything.
There's
lots and lots of choice.
And I want them to feel that they own some of the
yeah. So I told you to do it that way.
But they often will look back in my feed and look at older pictures and say, can you do this mug form with this glaze?
Exactly.
And I can usually do that. Cool. So,
and what do the kids think of this?
They've been supportive.
They're excited and
They always know what to get me for Christmas. I'm always looking for textures and stamps and things, certificates. Yes. It's funny as you progress that way there. I feel as parents there for the longest time, as our children decide to start treating us as we've treated them, and they're like, oh, do you want something? And you're like, oh, I don't need anything. And as you say, all of a sudden you're like, well, Well, I think it's funny. They love to joke and laugh and say that, mom sells pot out of the basement. And But that's true. It's nice to have a little cash in my wallet to hand them sometimes, or I think they're happy for me that I found something that totally occupies my time, and I'm not lonely. I'm not.
Yeah. Well, too, I mean, that's always it, right? And you can see, and I think too, it's important for your kids to see that you can be passionate, and that, you know, you can pick up a project and you can build new skills as an adult later in life. I have
leaned on them a little heavily because, as I said before, technology's not my thing. So they've helped me with ordering supplies, and, you know, one of these days, I think my next step will be a website.
Right.
Because people tend to look at my Facebook and Instagram feed and they think that I have a store and I just have these things readily available. Whereas the reality is it was custom made for somebody and it's long gone.
Yeah. Well, it's weird. And I think too, right, that's just other people trying to digest what you're doing, and they don't have a grasp on how, you know, that like literally that you're out of your basement, and that's it.
A lot of people just don't understand the process at all. So they might have unrealistic expectations about how fast I can produce it. And
I like that it's done when it's done, and we'll let you know. And, and you don't want to rush it, because that's how you get cracks.
You simply can't rush it. But I will start here encouraging people to place orders if they need it by Christmas.
Right. So that has started.
It starts already. Yeah.
So we're probably posting this in 2 weeks. So that's going to be into October. So if you're listening to the episode, and your Facebook page is Bobcaygeon Pottery.
That's right.
And your Instagram is Bobcaygeon Pottery.
Yes.
If you go and look at Colleen's stuff and you see something, today is the 29th, I believe. Maybe not.
I think so.
28th?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to have to look at my phone.
Yeah.
It's the 28th. So in 2 weeks, this is going to probably be posted. So don't hesitate.
Place your order.
Get off the pot and place an order if you want it for Christmas.
Yeah.
But I really want to thank you for your time, for a crazy DM out to you. Just asking if you're right. I'm just looking for people that do cool stuff and have cool stories. And I was like, man, that pottery, it caught my eye, and it's funny. And then I kind of pieced it together.
Well, I can really
who you were, and I laughed. My wife is like, you know Colleen, and I'm like, do I? And she's like, you do.
Yeah.
So I'm very thankful that you answered my DM, and that you're very gracious with your time to come out and record. So I really do appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. I can really relate to that level of curiosity that you have, because that's what got me started.
Well, as I say, we were joking. I said, well, maybe we'll have to go out and have a lesson.
Yeah.
So I'll have to talk to Michelle, and we'll have to maybe see how much creativity we have in our hands. But
you're always welcome to come by, and we'll scrape the mud off the wall when you're done.
There you go. Yes, for sure. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you for tuning in and having another listen to Scotty Doesn't Know.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Scotty's Journey. Don't forget to like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And join us next time when Scotty tries to learn something new, because Scotty doesn't know. Scotty Doesn't Know is a Sawcast production.